Hello people and welcome back to MBTI and Enneagram Connections. I am sorry that I have been absent for a while, and I'm sorry that I can't promise that I'll be super consistent on this channel even though I want to be. I have some other stuff going on in my life too. So that's kind of how things are. But I'm back for right now, and I'm going to continue where I left off with my series on different MBTI types and their enneagrams and how that sort of corresponds. So today we're going to talk about my absolute favorite MBTI type except for my own INFP, and that would be the INFJ and their enneagram types. INFJs are predominantly ones, 6 and 4s. I'm not going to speak a whole lot about INFJ 4 because I already spoke a lot about the 4 in my INFP video, so I'm going to focus on 6 and 1. But if you are an INFJ 4 and you want to talk about that, please leave a comment, please ask a question, please engage in a discussion. I'll happily do that. But for now, I'm going to start with the 1, and the 1 is the perfectionist. The 1 is have this basic desire for perfection and to be good and to be perfect, and have this basic fear of being not incapable but being evil or corrupted or malfunctioning. So that's where it's at for the 1. And this type for INFJ I find interesting because INFJ's primary cognitive function is introverted intuition, which is this mirroring of how the brain makes connections. It's able to analyze its own brain and its own mind and say, oh, that's how the brain makes patterns. I bet that's how your mind also makes patterns. So what that feels like for the other person is that the introverted intuition user can almost read your mind and can almost say, oh, I bet that's what's happening in your mind right now, and you'd say, yes, that's exactly what's happening. And then there is the secondary function, which is extroverted feeling. Extroverted feeling is reading body language, reading facial expressions, eyes, all that stuff, sort of feeling the mood in the room, and all that. So naturally, with this mind reading ability and this body reading ability, you can tell already now that INFJs are gonna be experts at everything to do with reading people, everything to do with understanding people. And that does make them good leaders, and that does make them good at persuading people to try to reach the same goals as they do, which is something the 1 is gonna have a lot of value from. Now, interestingly, this would also be of a lot of use for an 8, but almost no INFJs are 8, and I think that's because they're typically very self-conscious about how they use this ability, and they don't like to be dominating, they don't like power, and they don't particularly like attention. They're introverted after all. So that's very interesting. Introverted leaders does lead in another way, a little bit more subtle and gentle than more extroverted types would typically do. But yeah, that's the INFJ 1, which have this ability to help people strive for the best in the world and the best in themselves, and they also strive for the best in themselves, these INFJ 1s. And that's the trap of it. They can be extremely hard on themselves, they can be extremely self-conscious, and an INFJ thing already, and it's a 1 thing already. So when that gets combined, it gets double, and they can get really hard on themselves. Now the INFJ 6, I can't remember if I went over the 6 in my INFP video, so I'll just go over it again. Basically, the 6 have a basic desire for connection, and a basic desire to be loved, and a basic fear of being unlovable. INFJs tend to second guess themselves a lot. That's the flip side of the introverted intuition, and they tend to overthink themselves a lot, so they can have this fear of not being loved or not being understood, especially because it can be a little bit frustrating for them that other people can't do the thing they can do, where they just instantly understand the other person. But as we've covered, they're super good at understanding other people, and of course that makes it a lot easier to make connections. So both the ability to feel the mood in the room, extroverted feeling, and the ability to know what's going on in other people's minds, the introverted intuition, is going to be super helpful in forming these connections, which is so important for the INFJ. And that's how they use their cognitive functions in their most common enneagram types. The INFJ is a little bit of a special one because, well, this introverted intuition is super rare cognitive function. It's one of the rarest. Intuition is already pretty rare. It's about 1/4 of the population, and then it's only 10% that have introverted intuition. And it's one of the most, I wouldn't call it intimidating, but it's one of the hardest to understand if you don't use it, because it can feel really sort of, wow, how did you do that? And therefore there's a lot of ways to use it, and it's hard to generalize. So if you're an INFJ, or if you're someone else who uses introverted intuition, you could just be an INFP who have a lot of introverted intuition, or you could be an INTJ, they use it too. And if you have another enneagram type, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to have a discussion about how you use that ability, because it is a remarkable ability. I think that was all I had for now. So I'll go off and do some more research, and I'll make one more of these videos about another type. But until then, remember, be yourself, everybody else is taken.